All right, Aggs. Hopefully this is the one you've been waiting for. If you haven't watched the other two, part one, part two of the season preview, go back and do that. You got to do that because you got to know where I'm coming from, where how my brain's working, what I'm thinking. Just for yourself too, to take in that information. There's a lot there. There's a lot of offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator changes, new head coaches. There's a lot of personnel changes as well. I tell you a lot about how much production is coming back and what the dynamics were in the previous year, so we can take those into account. So, without further ado, my overall prediction for your 2023 Texas A&M Aggies is 10-2. I'm going 10-2, y'all. Okay. I've thought about it, and I've thought about it, and I've thought about it. I know a lot of people out there, they're saying 9-3, and so I thought about it long and hard on whether or not I should be in that same range, okay, or if I should be lower than that. Right? We were 5-7 last year. I don't think anybody in their right mind, first off, thinks that we're going to be worse than 7-5. I haven't seen it if it's out there. I'm not open to not seeing it. I've not seen it at all. Okay? So let's start there with a base for going through a lot of this reasoning. And let me give you the dynamics that I'm taking into account in my reasoning for thinking the 10 and the 2. Okay? This is where it gets fun. So really been interested in this. And if we're going to get, let's just say 9 wins, we just need to count those wins up. It's kind of that simple. You just need to have good reasons, and you've got to understand it's still just a prediction, and things can change. And we'll talk about the reasons how they change and what might be the changes. So you're going to get 3 out of conference wins. Now, I know that didn't happen last year. I'm not saying it's a complete guarantee, but that's the way it should go. You should beat New Mexico, Louisiana Monroe, Abilene Christian. Okay? Now, we'll go ahead and bank those for right now, and we'll talk about all the other situations that's going on. All right. So we had 3 games last year that we lost by a field goal. 3 games. Very winnable games. You could argue we beat ourselves in those games, and you could argue and you could say, well, those teams, they did that to themselves. Or you could say, well, yeah, but the games that you won by close margins, like Arkansas, for instance, why do you necessarily think you can just go out and win that game? Because that one was, quote unquote, kind of given to you with a turnover, fumble for a touchdown, and a doink field goal. Fair enough. That's fair. All right. That's why we talked about all the games and everything that all those teams are dealing with in their situations, right? So what we need to do, and here's something else to mention, to know, we lost to Bama by 4 points. We were down on the goal line for the final play of the game and could have easily been another win. And I told you in the previous previews that we've lost 5 games out of all last season by a touchdown or less. Okay? So if we were 5-7 last year, we need 5 more wins. All right? We got 3 out of 10 so far. All right? So let's consider again some of these close wins. All of the wins that we had were by 8 points or more. All but one were by 8 points or more. Okay, so that includes a 15-point win over LSU. Now, I mean, yeah, I already told you the line on LSU. We're like a 10-point dog already in that game at this point. So it's not necessarily fair just to go out and say, okay, we won that one by 15, therefore we're going to win it again by 15. No, I've got to be able to, in my mind, I'm trying to convince myself, not necessarily you all. I'm thinking I need to be able to convince myself that we're going to win that game again. So how do we win that game again? Okay, that we're going to talk through, and that's going to be true for all of this. And this is the fun part. This is why it's so interesting to do all this, because LSU could win that game. It's absolutely a losable game for us. It's not just look at Mississippi State and Ole Miss, like I said, or Tennessee and in Alabama, where I said these games are winnable. I'm not saying we're going to win that game, but Alabama is a winnable game, and I gave my reasons. And once you hear all that information, you've got to know that's reasoning that makes that possible for us to win that game. And I don't mean just like it's possible for anybody to win any given day. No. Alabama is returning 38% on defense. They have to actually reload this year. So it's a good possibility that we could win that game. Okay, when we just say possibility, that's not what I mean. Tennessee, knowing what they've got to replace on defense as well, find a quarterback. Same things, Bama's, for instance, dealing with, trying to figure out who their quarterback is. We don't have those problems necessarily this year. Sure, trying to figure out between Max and Connor. I've given you my prediction on that. Go back and watch that and see what you think. At this point, my belief is it's going to be Connor. He delivers much of the upside that we're going to need. And so if I'm also putting that out there and Connor's potentially, and let's just say he follows through and offers us that upside, then yes, again, that makes those games possibilities to win. Okay? So I don't think you can just run through and you look at a single game and say, yes, it's a win, it's a loss here and there and that, which is why I'm going through all of these hoops to say it's a dance and there's a lot going on. So you've got to consider some of those dynamics in making a reasonable prediction whether or not it's going to stay a win, turn into a win, or be a loss or red flag type of game, okay, or gotcha kind of game. So, one of the games we did lose last year was Florida. I think we were up 24-20 at the half. We're winning at the half. We give up 21 unanswered, and that was one of those ones where we just floundered in the second half. So I don't have to replace that one because we don't play Florida again this year, but it's got to be a win that we've got to go out and get. My big games to watch, I think, are Auburn, Bama, Tennessee, and then LSU. So these are a lot of the games that I think are either in our favor. I think really only one of them's in our favor. Will probably be dogs in Alabama, Tennessee, and LSU. But I think Auburn is a bit of a trap game. We play them first game out of the chute for SEC play. And it's Hugh Freeze. It's his first year. And I think that needs to be a watch-out kind of game. Okay? So watch out. Alabama, Tennessee, LSU. The goal here with these games would be, these are of course, LSU was a win. But let's just say Tennessee replaces Florida. We lost to Alabama last year. We also lost to Auburn last year, by the way, which is part of the reason why I put it in there, because these need to turn into W's. We need, it would be nice to hold on to the LSU game as a win. But what if it turns into a loss? All right, well, that means between Auburn, Alabama, and Tennessee, we need 2 out of those 3. Okay? Because if you're going to go and get 1 loss out of those 3 games and 1 loss with LSU, then you're to your 10-2. So from that stance, I've then got to make a case about, well, what are the games that we're going to win and why? So let's get into those actual numbers a little bit heavier. Like I said, 3 out of conference wins is what I'm predicting. I think 3 of the 4 games that we lost by 4 points or less flip. Okay? So we lost App State. That's an easy one for us to say, okay, well, we're going to get that one back, right? Because that was one of our 3 out of conference games. It was not a Power 5 team. And we could reasonably say, I think most would go along with this and say, yeah, okay, we're going to get that win back. We've got to get back Ole Miss. We got to get back South Carolina. And then, for instance, we would have to go out and get a win against Bama. And so, can we do that? Again, my answer is yes, that we definitely can do that. And the reasons why are more of the interesting part. And I talked to you about South Carolina and how everything rolled out with that game and just how awful we played. And then I went on to make that statement against Mississippi State too, who consequently is a team that we lost against. But we a lot of my prediction and my sort of intermingling between last year and this year is just how god awful our offense was. They're just terrible. I mentioned in the previews beforehand as well that those defenses we're going to be playing against this year are not going to have it as easy as they did last year, in preparation in particular, which is going to play out on the field, obviously. But you get my emphasis here. You're not going to be able to just go and straightforward prepare for us. It's not that easy. You know, we've been wanting. We talk about eye violations a lot, like 2 or 3 years ago. We haven't been creating many of those this last year. That will probably be something that you're going to see a lot more out of our team, which is going to make it more difficult for teams to prepare. So I think a lot of that feeds into whether or not we can get over the hump on some of these teams as well. And because it wasn't an average performance, just think if we had played average last year, where would we be? Easily, probably 7-5. You can gain 2 wins if you just play average, right? I mean, we don't lose to App State and we're 6-6. Okay, you know, we just win one of the games that we lost by 3 points, and okay, we're 7-5. Look, and I know all that kind of sounds homerish to a degree, but the difference is how you go about justifying these things. So this is my reason. You know, no one has to agree with it, but this is just the way I do it. I'm trying to keep it as real as possible because I don't want to go pump sunshine. Okay, 10-2 is. It feels like a sunshine pumper, which was something that got me so. I waited basically a day on this to really think about it once I came to this conclusion. So I don't want to pump sunshine. I want to have actual reasons. And if those reasons don't come true, it doesn't necessarily make me wrong. It's just stuff happens between now and, you know, say 16 weeks from now. So I think we're going to retain at least 2 wins. I think we're going to retain Miami, and I think we're going to retain the Arkansas win. I think we're going to play much better in the Miami game. And I think overall the dynamics between what's going on at Arkansas, as I explained about the culture situation, ours is, I don't see how ours is not getting better. But it seems like something's going on there, and they're going to be trying to, in a sense, kind of reload, revamp. And I don't think it's a great time to be doing that. They're still going to be somewhat veteran, but I still got to think that, like I was pointing out, their loss to Liberty, and the way our defensive line is going to be, that we're going to hammer them pretty good. I think the same is going to be true for Miami. And when we get into that, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure that's going to happen again. It's going to make it difficult for Van Dyke to distribute to Restrepo, and you know, Parrish is something of a different note. We'll see if Durkin's got our run defense ready to go. I definitely still think it could be a closer game, but I'm thinking with the offensive weapons that we've got, if offensive line delivers, it's going to be hard to keep up with us. I just think it's going to be hard to keep up with us, and that's one of the reasons why I think we're going to see Connor at the helm, because it's going to make it difficult to keep up with us, right? So I got recap 3 out of conference wins, right? I think we we flip 3 of the 4 games that we lost by 4 points, which one of those was the Alabama game. So we could lose the Alabama game, but I think we're going to get 3 of the others back, right? So we're up to 6, and technically 1 loss within that mix. 2 retentions. So, like I said, I think Miami and Arkansas. I'm not counting LSU as a retention right now, right? So keep that in mind. That is definitely one I said that was likely could easily become a loss. So with 2 retentions, Miami and Arkansas, that puts us up to 8. So 8-4, looking for 2 more. 1 wrong, I believe 100%. 1 wrong will be righted, and one of those wrongs will be either Ole Miss or Mississippi State. Okay, we are going to write one of those, and I think we're going to get one upset. Now that upset could be Bama, it could be Tennessee, and we could still win against LSU, and then say drop an Ole Miss or a Mississippi State again, but beat the other one in conjunction with having lost to, say, Alabama, something like that, and still having beaten Tennessee and finished up with LSU. But if I had to have my druthers, what I would think would probably end up happening is we find a way to beat Alabama at home, lose to LSU on the road, and then we get caught by one other team, like either an Auburn or an Ole Miss. Perhaps a Mississippi State, but one of those teams could definitely catch us, and you see how those dynamics would then work out, right? So I think we're gonna get beat once, and I think we're gonna get upset once. So there's where my two losses are kind of coming from, and that kind of sums it up for how I think that's going to play out. And you can see, like, that kind of gives it a conceptual record, not like a here's where the L and here's where the W is coming from. Conceptually, here's where we're moving from and to, and kind of here's how we're going to get there without specifically saying, well, you got to beat this team and you got to beat that team, because you don't. You can get there a bunch of different ways, and usually that's the way it happens. So that's why I've gotten to giving this prediction in this way. So just to reiterate, how can we go from 5-7 to potentially 10-2? It could end up being 9-3, and I'd be okay with that. I'd really, I'd love that. I really would. 9-3 would be sweet. It could be 10-2. How do we do that? I've mentioned them throughout, and I want to point out Connor is going to be a big deal. Offensive line doing their thing is going to be a big deal. Petrino doing what he is, I believe, here to do is going to be a big freaking deal. We have just been too vanilla, and that's why I said too, I want to crush New Mexico. Go and run that playbook the way it needs to be run. Tune that playbook up for Miami. We need to go out and be ready to beat the tail off Miami. We don't get a drive to get ready and get comfortable. No, we need to be be able to run these plays in a game situation from the get-go. So none of that holding the playbook stuff back. And when we come out firing like that, there's a lot of upper end potential that we're going to have just in general overall. Low key, our defense has won us some games in the past. The defensive line is going to be about as salty as they've ever been. We got some things to figure out at linebacker. We got a cornerback situation to figure out. I think we're pretty good on the backside with Bryce Anderson and probably Damani. It could be Gilbert in place of for the other safety, maybe Deuce Harmon or something. But I think you're looking at Damani and Bryce for sure. And these are, I think, tried and true guys. So I think this defense is shaking up again to be pretty salty. They kind of were last year. We didn't have McKinley Jackson for the first, 5-6 games, something like that. Hurt our run game, and we were a little bit young, so it was difficult to. We should be better. And these guys have bulked up. If you haven't seen some of the pictures out, they have. They look like they have run-stopping legs and run-stopping arms. They're big. So the defense should be better equipped. I think we were somewhere in the neighborhood of 75th last year. And any improvement in there would probably make the difference in a lot of those three-point games. It would help hold a lot of the games as well. Geez, we played so horrible last year. And I know it's no guarantee that we get better, but it's just probably more likely that we don't continue to play that same way and bounce back in some reasonable way to at least a 7-5, 8-4 kind of situation. So then, if we're kind of in those areas, trying to figure out how to get 2 more wins, if that was your average, is not out of the ordinary. Now, I understand it feels weird, and most people from the outside looking in nationally will say, like, oh yeah, you're going to get 5 more wins from 5 and 7. You're crazy. Well, all right. But the team was just so culturally and leadership stripped last year. That's how those kinds of things happen. Are they righted? I don't know for sure. But I know what steps have been taken to right the ship. I know what locker room problems are now gone. And I think something that's not going to be getting said enough, I'll say it here, I don't know this necessarily for sure, but I think everybody's probably gotten a different vibe from the team in the last, say, 2 years, ever since Kellen left. I'm not putting it on him necessarily, but in Jimbo's first year, we went out and made some splashes, did well the second year, and definitely in the third year, right? I don't think the intensity's quite been there ever since, but I think that intensity is back. And if you've got that intensity going on, you got let's just say you got kids ready to dig in rather than trying to run away, and causing all those problems. These are the kinds of recipes that you can't put numbers to. Culture, leadership, urgency, a lot of that has to do with it. How could it go wrong, though? How could it go back to 5 and 7? It's a very important conversation. I think the first thing that probably comes to our minds is injuries. Maybe we go down injury at quarterback again, or it's a bad call, let's just say, at quarterback, and it doesn't pan out the way we needed to pan out. But it could be like, for instance, at offensive line, defensive line, where we've had, not so much a defensive line, but injuries on the offensive line. If they just don't come out and do what they're supposed to do, that's how we end up having a problem. That's how you have a large, more systemic issue. Another one is if Jimbo and Petrino don't mesh. Petrino has to earn trust. Jimbo is going to have to give it. Yes, I understand it's still technically a two-way street on that, but you get the dynamic that's working here. I think it's ridiculous for Jimbo just to go out and just straight, oh yeah, I'm just going to give this guy everything he wants. He can have it, take it. No, he's got to go out and show it. He's got to win Jimbo over just like he's got to win everybody else over. People may not like that, I suppose, because they don't have a lot of faith in Jimbo right now, but it's important that he goes and does that, because not only is he winning Jimbo over, he's winning the rest of the team over as well. You realize that, right? And so quarterbacks, offensive line, it'll give them not just trust, it'll give them confidence in what they're doing when they start seeing it work. So if he's taking it to them and he's putting that out there, it's really going to make waves through this offense. But it'll then be Jimbo's job to make sure that he gives that trust. I think of to a degree, a Mac Brown kind of situation where he's just doubled over on his knees all the time. Man, that guy let his play callers call plays, and that's the way it went. Can Jimbo be that? We're going to find out one way or another. So that dynamic is probably the most interesting for me. Last, and I've alluded to it, is leadership. I've already talked about culture, but leadership's got to be there. Culture's got to be there. We've got the bad actors have got to move on. If they haven't, that will derail all of this. If leadership doesn't step up, I think it derails all of this. It's not just having a leadership committee, but those vocal guys on the field making things happen. It can't just be the coaches calling the shots. They don't always respond to them. When they don't agree, then they look next to them. They look to the side. They look left. They look right. And they see, was this guy left or right of me? Do they agree with me or do they agree with the coaches? If they agree with the coaches and they speak up about it, that gets that person back in line more easily. And it shapes the culture of this team. So I sure hope that's not going to be the way that this gets derailed, but it's got to be mentioned because it's a possibility. We're probably as weatherproofed as we've ever been. Even if somebody like Foster goes out, we probably have somebody that can step into that much easier and deal with that. We've got the wide receivers at the highest level we've ever had them, which is odd. And I think we've got a solid group of running backs. Quarterback, defensive line, all the way through. So big potential for that. Tell me what you think. I think 10-2 is definitely on the table, and I think it's a reasonable prediction. I'm not worried about 11-1 or even that 12-0 kind of situation. I don't think that's where we should even go with this kind of conversation. I just hope that what I put forward here are decent reasons to go from, say, an 8-4 team or a 9-3 team to having that good chance of being to that 10-2 team. If we can make the changes that would make a average A&M team of 8-4 a 2-win better team, then we're on to something. Okay, so that's where we're at. I hope it comes to fruition. Coming up, I'm going to be talking about fall camp. What are the 5 focal points that are going on there that I think are the most important to sort out, and what we're hoping to achieve in our fall camp. So look for that coming up in the very near future. And then I got a big surprise episode that's going to be coming quick that will get everybody stirred up. So until then, thanks and gig 'em.